So, if you like studying spreadsheets in silence, boy, have I got a game for you. I mean, I have to have a little bit of sense of humor when it comes to Hadrian's Wall, the new Garphill and Renegade joint that combines a flippin' right structure with a crunchy, synergistic, resource exchangey sandbox game. I mean, when you crack this thing open, you have a few wooden pieces, you have some cards, and then BAM! Epic pads of paper! These each are the two sheets that end up representing your player board as you play the game. And while I'd like to say it's nowhere near as complicated as it seems, it's totally intuitive, each of these sections is about as dense as these pads themselves. But if you're willing to wade through the wilds of Hadrian's Wall, there's actually a pretty interesting game underneath. Structurally, it's simple. Players each have two sheets of paper representing their piece of the famed wall separating Roman-conquered England from the wildlings. Picts of the north. One side is your wall structure and defenses, foraging and production. The other is your population and buildings, the things you invest in to bring glory to the empire, translated into points of 4 different types. In each of the game's 6 rounds, a central card is flipped indicating the workers and universal supply cubes each player gets. Then players draw 2 cards from their shuffled but symmetric decks, playing 1 card in front of them for various purposes, including some extra workers and resources, then tucking the other in their tableau for endgame scoring conditions. And then players are off to simultaneously spend, gain, and manipulate their resources with no oversight or regulation or turn structure whatsoever as they please. Spend a builder to build your wall, or a universal supply cube to build out other parts of the wall requiring some parts of your wall to already be built, or purple workers for foraging, which might increase your universal supply cube production, or warriors to increase your defenses, or yellow to develop any of the 5 different population types, which may lead to being able to build different buildings with their own little mini games, from a push your luck gladiator training system to performances to spatial assembly scouting for additional stuff to a set collection thing and shady bathhouse deal to get rid of your shame thing. It's a lot, and while the left side, the wall side, has fairly universal rules in which you just pay what's on the left side of a row, or having achieved the marking of what's on the left side of the row, you get to scratch in the leftmost available box in that row in order to possibly get some rewards, which may involve scratching off other boxes elsewhere on your player boards, potentially getting even more bonuses. There's still a lot of important strategic considerations, limitations on when you can do that, what prior requisite must be fulfilled in order to fill in that slot. There's a lot to consider here, and it's nowhere near as complex as what's going on the right side of the board. But we cannot lose sight of why we are doing all this. Once all players have declared that they're done with their Rube Goldbergian exchange of meeples, supplies, and checkboxes, which aside from 2 of the 5 mini-games on the right sheet, none of it will impact you in the least, and even then, it's that you or your opponents might possibly give one another a supply cube. There's a picked invasion, and a number of cards from the central deck will be revealed based on the round, and players compare the results to their 3 defensive garrisons and determine if they get point rewards, shame, or both. Then a new round begins, and you repeat this process for all 6 rounds of the game, and then the game ends, and the player who has the most points through a combination of the 4 different point tracks plus the points accumulated from the variable scoring conditions that you played in each of the rounds, less the points lost from having shame, is the winner. Whew. Okay, you got it all? Hadrian's Wall isn't a bad game, but it's an incredibly niche one. The flip and or roll and write genre has been celebrated for its scalability, portability, and accessibility, and this game takes up a big amount of space, is just as complicated as it is complex, and while yes, it scales just fine from 1 to 6 players, there's virtually no meaningful interaction, and rounds are just nuanced analytical affairs that players are likely to just sit in silence for 5 or 10 minutes while they figure figure out their own stuff, occasionally passing a resource to one another, only speaking up to declare they've done all they can do or ask how the hell theaters or gladiators work. So it contrasts heavily with what people want out of this genre in the first place. But that contrast is here to offer a flip and right for people who want this heady, sandboxy, and nuanced experience. And you know what? If that's what you're looking for, it does it really well. If you like games where you get a constant dopamine rush from converting one resource to another, literally checking boxes to check other boxes and maximize the efficiency of every action, this is going to be for you. Ultimately, my structural complaints about the game are that in order to make the game feel so vast in such little space, it ended up really visually overwhelming, and learning is a pretty big barrier to entry. The rulebook is 24 densely packed pages. Also, the game has surprisingly little pressure. With so many options at your disposal, nothing aside from the picks and your personal scoring conditions give you much need to focus on one thing or another. And while the card flip dictates what resources between workers and supply cubes you have each round, not much is going to make it feel different from game to game to game. Personally, I think it works best as a solo game, when you're in the mood for a rich, meaty experience but don't want to deal with a lot of component management. You want a game that's relatively concise but also robust. Solo is played virtually the exact same way as multiplayer. You just run a dummy deck in order to handle the 2 possible points of player interaction in the game. You can put on some music, take all the time you want, and just really go to town on the synergistic sandbox that is Hadrian's Wall, getting that super satisfying feeling of converting things into other things which become other things over and over and over again. And while that's still technically applicable, I like it less as a multiplayer game. It's pretty dense, it has some real esoteric rules, and because players are virtually just doing their own thing for the majority of the game, it doesn't really feel conducive to group environments. Look, I'm a nerd. I know how to have fun crunching numbers and checking boxes, but that doesn't mean I want to do it with my friends. Hadrian's Wall gets points for innovation, for its freedom, and for having a legitimately great solo game. And I have no doubt that this is exactly what some people are looking for. All I'm saying is just know what you're getting into if you decide to scale Hadrian's Wall. And that's our review. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald. If you enjoyed this video, we have all kinds of other reviews, interviews, and recommendations via writing, podcasts, and video here on our channel and website cardboardherald.com. Our content is audience supported, so if you want to show your support, please visit our Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Cardboard Herald.